Good morning. So, today we are going to start with a beautiful sonnet written by William Wordsworth. The world is too much with us. William Wordsworth, we all know, is the central figure in English romantic poetry. Romanticism can be defined as a renaissance of wonder and as an addition of strangeness to beauty. It is a craving for the beautiful, it is a craving for the ideal, it is the craving for the picturesque, the intense emotion, lyricism, sincere emotions, diction. In fact, it implies a return to nature. Now, when we talk about romanticism, we must know how and when it began. So, in the first 30 years of the 19th century, we see a cluster of poets who brought about the romantic revival. These poets, they were like frightened by the coming of industrialism in the wake of the Industrial Revolution in England. So, frightened by the coming of industrialism, they sought refuge in nature. And Wordsworth, William Wordsworth, was one of the greatest of these poets who, along with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, launched the Romantic movement in English literature with their joint publication, Lyrical Ballads, in 1798. I would like to compare this Lyrical Ballads to T.S. Eliot's essay on tradition and individual talent. Just as lyrical ballads can be considered to be a manifesto of romanticism, individual tradition and individual talent has also been considered as a manifesto of classicism. So, as a manifesto of romanticism, lyrical ballads is something which is a supreme moment in the history of English poetry. Now, when we talk about Wordsworth, what comes to your mind? We have been thinking about Wordsworth. Whenever Wordsworth comes to our mind, nature comes there. Nature, the simplicity, the flowers, the blooms, everything, suddenly they appear. The daffodils, 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their head in sprightly dance. And so, like, these are the visual images which, at least in front of my eyes, they come cluttering. Now, Wordsworth had the keenest eye among all the romantic poets for whatever was deep and essential in nature. Wordsworth saw, for him, the embodiment of divine spirit was nature. It was the greatest of all teachers. Wordsworth's worship of nature led Wordsworth to venerate the simple folk who lived in the eye of nature. Not the town dwellers, but the simple folk who lived in the eye of nature. He found them to be, you can say, more pure, purer, wiser than the town dwellers, and their language was much less corrupt than those of the town dwellers. Another thing that's very remarkable about William Wordsworth is that rarely, very rarely, we find in William Wordsworth uh, any trace of the 18th century thought. You can say that it's all these things. Wordsworth's intense sensitivity to nature, to its beauty, to its power, that make him the archetypal poet, the archetypal romantic poet of the 19th century. So, after having discussed Wordsworth, now let's come to the poem, The World is Too Much with Us. This poem is a Petrarchan sonnet. We have already discussed the two types of sonnets. It contains an octave and a sestet. The rhyme scheme of the octave is ABBA, ABBA, but the sestet varies. And then this sonnet was written in 1802, but it was published in 5 years later in 1807 in like the poems in the two volumes. Poems in the two volumes in 1807. Now, I would like to tell you what was the immediate reason. What was the immediate reason for this poem? It was an inspiration, like the immediate source of inspiration for this poem came from Wordsworth's witnessing the predicament, the situation of his nephew, Edgar. Now, Edgar was into business and he was ill. Now, Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy, they tried to convince him a lot to leave the business alone and relax in the company of nature, and or just to get rid of the materialistic world and the materialistic gains, not to bother about the materialistic gain and bother about his own spiritual gain, about his own physical condition. But Edgar, despite all the kind of counseling that Wordsworth and his sister gave Dorothy, he refused to listen, and he kept being involved in his business. He was in stock exchange, and he just succumbed to it. He died. He could not make it. So that was the inspiration. Wordsworth was disgusted with the people had suddenly started caring more for the materialistic gains, and they were more bothered running after money, running after power. And in the wake of the Industrial Revolution, we know that monetary gain and materialistic gain became all important, and people had no time. What is this life if full of care? We have no time to stand and stare. So they had no time to enjoy the beauty of nature and to seek solace in nature. And this is because Wordsworth had been nurtured on love for nature. And for him, nature was the key source of happiness. So he was truly disgusted. And this poem is about the same thing. I'll discuss the theme after. So we see that it was Edgar, his nephew's death, which was the immediate inspiration behind this poem. Now let's come to the title of the poem. The world is too much with us. World is too much with us. What does this mean? This means that now the world, materialistic world, has assumed immense proportions. It has assumed immense importance. And people are forgetting. People are forgetting the beauty of nature. Nature and the natural beauty, that's become secondary to them. So this was, and what is the theme of this poem? Like if you have to start, and if you ask what is the theme of this poem, then we can simply say that here the poet is lamenting on the withering connection between humankind, mankind, and nature, and the materialistic approach which the English people had adopted, that filled Wordsworth with disgust. And because, as I told you, Wordsworth had nurtured on the love of nature and found her to be the best source of happiness. We see Wordsworth in this poem, we see that Wordsworth is too much in pain. He's pained to see the growing attraction of the people of the 20th century towards materialism. And he's lamenting, truly lamenting the loss of their appreciation of the beauties of nature. It is because this materialistic approach we see has transformed human beings into insensitive beings. Man's lust for power, man's lust for money has made him hollow. And they have readily bartered, exchanged their souls for materialistic gains. Now, let's come to the stanza-wise analysis of this poem. The first stanza, the world is too much with us, late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. So here the poet is lamenting that man has devoted all his time amassing wealth, and they waste all their powers, which should have been used in spiritual elevation in company of nature. They have wasted all that time, all their power in running after the worldly pursuits. See, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. And we waste, and then he says that we waste time earning and spending money. We don't find the time, neither the time nor the inclination to enjoy the beauty of nature. And the last line, we have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. Sordid means something which is selfish, something dirty, and boon is a blessing. So we have, the poet is saying that we have struck the unfortunate bargain of losing our hearts in return for monetary gains. So this was the first stanza where a poet talks about man's excessive absorption in material objects and his alienation from nature, his distancing himself from nature. Now, the second stanza, the poet is giving us examples of the insensitiveness towards nature. The material, we are all distracted by the delights of the materialistic worlds, and it distracts our attention from nature and the vast natural phenomena. Look, it's all mentioned here. The sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours. All this, they fail to touch us today. They fail to move the humankind today. Why? Because we are all running after materialistic pursuits. The poet is truly grieved to see this apathy of man towards nature. And so he says, why? Why is he regretting? He says, we are out of tune. See, for this, for everything, we are out of tune. What does out of tune here means? It means that we are devoid of any kind of interest for nature. and we are out of tune. It moves us not. Means we are not moved, and there's no harmonious relationship that we share with nature. Now, I would like to come to the third stanza. Here, in the third stanza, we see that here the poem, the sonnet, betrays Wordsworth's kinship with the pagan spirit which conjured up a special deity for every particular, each object of nature. Now, first of all, what is the meaning of the word pagan? Can any one of you please tell me? In the third stanza, the whole stanza rotates around the word pagan. Pagan is a word which has been taken from the Latin word paganus, which means it is used to denote those people who follow religions other than the main religions of the world, like Christianity, Judaism, etc. So, and they worship multiple deities. For them, their religion is a very, very old religion. It's a very ancient, that is why the poet calls it a creed outworn. Creed outworn. Look at the first line. A pagan suckled in a creed outworn. Creed means faith. Outworn means outdated. So he says that paganism is an outdated faith, a very old faith. But he wants to go back because he's frustrated at this upsurge, at the rising tide of materialism which the Industrial Revolution has brought with it. And so that's why he says that, so paganism is a religion in which you worship multiple deities and where human being is considered to be at par with all the other parts of the universe, like the trees, all the natural objects, and man, they're all in the same level. And they are worshippers of multiple deities. As I said, what did I say right now? I said that he is always, in this poem, we can see that the poet is always conjuring up a special deity for every object of nature. Now, and what was Christianity? Christianity was belief in one God. But now Christianity is not coming to help. Christianity cannot stop man from running after materialism. So in sheer frustration, the poet decides, the poet is like his saying, is very forcefully, is voicing his desire. What does he say? He's saying that a pagan suckled in a creed outworn, so might I, standing on this pleasantly, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn. He wants to adopt the pagan religion where he can worship the various multiple deities of nature. And so we can see that Wordsworth is willing. Wordsworth is willing to give up his faith in one God, in one God pervading nature, because Christianity could not stem the tide of materialism. So in the sestet, in the sestet, we can say that the poet is expressing his desire to break the bonds of religion which stops him from nature worship. He wants to be converted to the outdated pagan religion, the outdated pagan faith of the old Greeks, so that he can believe in the myths which were all related to the old gods and the goddesses. Here we have two of them. Have sight of Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. So here we see two figures from Greek mythology. So Okay, somebody is presenting perhaps? Sanjeev Kumar is presenting. Okay. So now we see that he wants to be converted to that outdated religion because he wants to feel the presence of gods like Proteus. Who was Proteus? Proteus was the prophetic old man of the sea who came to make prophecies, and then after making prophecies, he went back. They are figures from Greek mythology, Proteus and Triton. So, and the Triton was, now he was another sea god, and he used to blow his conch shell. And so these were the two figures who we see here mentioned. Now, Triton was the Greek god of sea, whose parents were the sea god and goddesses. Their names were Poseidon and Amphitrite. Amphitrite and Poseidon. Triton was the Greek god whose parents were Poseidon and Amphitrite, the god and goddesses of the sea. Now, Triton lived with his parents in a golden palace on the bottom of the sea. And later, it's always often depicted that he used to blow a conch shell and like a trumpet. He could blow the conch shell like a trumpet. So he says that as a pagan, if I become a pagan, then I would go to the sea, I would go to the meadows, to the pasture lands, and there I can, in isolation with nature, I can hear, I can see the sea god Proteus, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn, that would make him less lonely. He's very lonely in today's rising tide of materialism. So he wants to be at one with nature. He wants a complete unison with nature where he can enjoy the beauty of the old Greek mythological figures. And his Proteus is mentioned. Proteus, who was rising from the sea, means he came and he made prophecy. He was a prophetic old man, as I told you. He came and he made prophecies, and then he went back. So he could have a vision of the sea god Proteus, and then this sight would make him less lonely and help him to find an association with the lovelier aspects of nature. And then we can also hear, look at the last line, or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. So Triton, as I told you, was a sea god, Greek sea god, and he used his conch shell to blow like a trumpet in order to quieten, to calm down the tumultuous waves of the sea. So this is what the poet's main motives are in this poem. Now, if there are a few things which I would like to tell you. I'd like to quote a very beautiful tribute that Oliver Elton has said about this poem. He says that the world is too much with us, rises and bursts into imaginative strength like a sudden flame on a mountain top. So we see this poem has been very, very popular. It has been much applauded because it has a emotional intensity, the poetic appeal, and it has got a myth-making quality. With all these things, they combine together to lend this poem a lasting appeal ever since its composition. So these are the major points. Now, let's talk about the analysis bit, which we usually do at the end of the class. Let's critically discuss this poem. So here we see that in this poem, again, it's a Petrarchan sonnet. The first lines rhyme ABBA, the octave. And in the sestet, the rhyme scheme becomes C, D, C, and D, C, D. So by doing so, the poet changes the tone of the poem also, and there's a dichotomy in this poem between the blessings of nature and the wasteful trappings of human beings. So, if there are any doubts, any more questions? Okay, so what can you all now tell me what is the meaning of the word forlorn? Let me ask you a few questions. What is the meaning of the word forlorn?
Sad
Yes.
or low.
Unhappy.
Yes, very good. It means, and what is the meaning of the word creed? I have already told you all creed.
Faith.
Very good. Faith. Outworn, it's quite clear. Outworn,
Outdated.
yes, outdated. Now, so great God, the best line of this poem now is a great God, I would rather be a pagan, suckled in a creed outworn. This is Wordsworth's declaration of the new faith that he wants to adopt. Great God, I would rather be a pagan, suckled in a creed outworn. So, I hope we are done for today. And if there are any questions, you all are free to ask. Okay, which work marks the beginning of the Romantic movement? Which significant work can be called the manifesto of Romanticism?
Lyrical ballad.
Very good. Be loud. Be loud.
Ma'am, lyrical ballad published in 1798 by Ma'am, lyrical ballad
Yes, yes, I got you. Lyrical ballads, the joint production by Wordsworth
published
and Coleridge, the senior generation, the older generation of Romantic poets. It was published in the year, which is very important.
1798.
Very good.
1798.
1798. And I have compared to which other seminal work of literature? Can you tell me? I have compared lyrical ballads to another significant work of literature. I just said that just as this lyrical ballads can be called a manifesto of Romanticism, we can call the essay Tradition and Individual Talent. Okay, you all haven't read it, you are in part one, so it's quite understandable. So, but you must know now that Tradition and Individual Talent is an essay which can be called a manifesto of classicism. So, Romanticism and classicism are two trends which are always pitted against each other in English poetry. So, whenever we are talking about Romanticism, it's but natural that we talk about classicism. So, for classicism, the best manifesto of classicism would be T.S. Eliot's essay on tradition and individual talent, just as the best manifesto of romanticism would be lyrical ballads written jointly by the two older generation romantic poets, Wordsworth and Coleridge. So let me have an answer from you all again. Like, can you name the important romantic poets, please?
William
John
Keats.
Coleridge.
Ma'am,
Wordsworth.
P.V.
Shelley.
Byron.
Very good. So we can divide them into two generations, the older generation and the younger generation. Now, which two poets come in the older generation?
Ma'am, Wordsworth and
Ma'am,
S.T. Coleridge.
Coleridge.
Very good. Wordsworth